Yo, how you guys doing? Here I'm just doing a bit more 2D. Getting used to Photoshop and how it feels to draw digitally and getting kind of comfortable now. With this piece, I thought a more deliberate approach would be a nice change. Usually with these 2D stuff, I like to just free flow, but this time I thought I'd switch it up. Like, as you can see, the red lines I'm making here are kind of like a skeleton for how the rest will flesh out. It's basically blocking in the main shapes that I want to see, and then I can texture them and shade them in later. There are obviously advantages and disadvantages of planning before you go into a piece. In the more free flow, kind of just putting lines onto the digital canvas, in that way, you sometimes come up with things that you could never have planned for. So you can like surprise yourself, and sometimes those surprises actually make the piece look better. So if it's premeditated, or if you've made your construction lines, then there's a lesser chance of you coming up with some sporadic inspiration which would inject something that you didn't expect into the piece. But of course, as with most things, it's a balancing act. I can still come up with some sporadic, improvised shapes and forms, but within the construction lines, within the preordained structure that I've put out. So, yeah, it's like a balancing act. You could say it's tempting the line between chaos and order. But perhaps I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. With these pieces, I often find myself kind of defaulting to more organic structures and organic shapes. Like, if you can see here, I've been told that what I'm drawing kind of looks like wood. It looks like the inside of some sort of organ, maybe some kind of cryptic forest. And the reason I think I default to these more organic structures is that for me they strike the perfect balance between predictability and novelty. So if you look at a pattern that's too simple, too repetitive and too predictable, then it's not a very interesting pattern, or it's not a very interesting thing to look at. Same with like music, or something like music. Anything with a kind of pattern. So if you've got a song that's way too repetitive, too simple and too predictable, then you can't really listen to it for a very long time. The other side of the coin is if something's too chaotic, like if a pattern, you can see no recurrence, no overarching structure, so just random lines everywhere, then that doesn't strike you as very interesting either. So same with music. If there's just random pitches and random sounds with no sort of tempo or no sort of rhythm, then you can't listen to that for very long either. I think the best kind of pattern, or the most interesting kind of formula, is striking the balance between predictability and novelty. So as we can see here, it is at first glance perhaps quite chaotic, but over time you can see kind of a overarching structure. Like if you look at a forest or a picture of a forest, then there's these two elements of predictability and novelty kind of come into play. So you can see that there are trees, and each one kind of looks similar to the next one, but they're never exactly identical, and they never repeat in a predictable way. So you might see a stump here that might look like this stump, or a tree here, a tree trunk here that may look similar to this tree trunk, a leaf here that might look similar to this leaf, and so on. But they're never identical, and there's always that variation that kind of keeps it interesting. So that's basically what I'm trying to emulate with pieces like this. So if we can see, this ornamentation kind of leads to a focal point in the middle of the digital canvas. This focal point is in the hole in the center. Looking across the other surrounding parts of the piece, if you squinted your eyes, you would just see a kind of grey mass. And so this hole adds some much needed contrast with its deep blackness. Holes also inject a kind of curiousness, you could say, because light doesn't reach into the blackness, so what's hidden inside is a mystery. So that helps to add intrigue, but as well as invoking curiosity, holes are intimidating. Someone once said that, something to the effect of, if you look into the abyss, then the abyss stares back at you. And this intimidating factor, I think, is the same reason why it's intriguing. So, as I said, light can't reach into the deep chasm, so to know what's inside, it must be explored. But the lack of certainty and the fear of the unknown injects the more intimidating aspect. Holes also have a connotation with infinitum. In large, deep, dark holes, the bottom is never visible. There's always a connotation with the deep chasm without an end or without a floor. And this fear of infinity contributes as much as the darkness or as much as the unknowability. So this deep, unknowable, possibly infinite, unexplored area always invokes a kind of anxiety, especially if it's a large crater. So this idea that the abyss stares back seems to be accurate, as you're confronted directly by the dark unknown conveyed by the blackness and the lack of light, as well as the innumerable possibilities it holds and the infinity that's associated with, conveyed by its concealed bottom or imperceptible limits. This apprehension and fear of the abyss seems like a reasonable reaction. However, the enamorment and curiosity for the possibilities that the void guards with its blackness is also, again, it's also intriguing. So it's tempting to get sucked in to the blackness, to enter the hole's gaping maw, to uncover its closely guarded secrets out of curiosity. However, once you step into the hole, there is no light. Navigation is impossible. You are trapped and confused in the bottomless pit, dissolved and undifferentiated from the engulfing blackness. Many have fallen prey to the whole's enticement, and many have gone mad over attempting to know the unknowable, trying to ponder the infinite, trying to encase the limitless into cerebral encompassment. However, no confine is big enough to house that which is beyond size. None may gaze upon Cthulhu without descending into insanity. So perhaps it is better to ignore, to look out completely, focus somewhere else. However, attempting to ignore it will not make it go away. And the prospect of uncovering its unknowable secrets is always too tempting. What seems to be the best option is to perhaps not gaze into the abyss directly, but gaze upon its perimeter, on the line between unknown, unfathomable chaos and monodimensional entropic uniformity. Perhaps on this border, beautiful and interesting things are found, where pattern is not chaotic and unfollowable, but neither is it entirely predictable or formulaic. Food for thought.